They said I didn't belong. That my voice was too strong, my skin too loud, my ambition too much. I stayed silent to survive. But silence has a price, and when they tried to destroy everything I'd built, I gave them truth instead. And the truth? It burned the whole company down. My name is Danielle Brooks, and for 10 years, I believed that hard work was enough. That if I kept my head down, smiled in meetings, and never raised my voice, the world would see me for what I was: capable, reliable, and worthy. But in corporate America, worth has a color. And mine, apparently, came with a price tag that said less than. I joined Alston & Gray, a financial consulting firm in Chicago, when I was 27. Bright, ambitious, fresh out of grad school, the only black woman in my department. The office smelled like polished wood and money, glass walls, cold smiles, and the constant hum of ambition. People didn't talk, they performed. And I learned early that survival meant blending in, not standing out. I kept my curls straightened, wore muted tones, and never brought up race. Because in that place, silence was professionalism. And silence was safe. For the first 5 years, I played by every rule they never had to explain. I came early, left late, smiled through the microaggressions. Like when a client would look past me and ask a white colleague, "Can she take notes for us?" Or when my manager, Elliot, once said during lunch, "Danielle, you're so articulate. You'd make a great diversity hire poster." They laughed. I smiled. Because what else could I do? In rooms like that, laughter was currency, and I couldn't afford to go broke. But I rose fast. My numbers spoke louder than their gossip. By year 6, I was a senior analyst, pulling in more clients than anyone in my team. The partners started noticing me, or so I thought. One day, I got called into a glass-walled meeting room. The senior partner, Margaret Hale, sat at the head of the table. Grey suit, red lipstick, the kind of woman who could kill a rumor with a glance. "Danielle," she said smoothly, "we're considering you for promotion to associate director. Your metrics are excellent. You've earned this." But, there it was. That word. But. A single syllable that could erase years of work. "But we've had some feedback about your tone." "My tone?" I asked. "Yes. Some of the team feels you can come across as intimidating or defensive." Defensive. That word that follows black women like a shadow. The corporate translation for, "You refuse to shrink." I nodded, thanked her for her honesty, and went back to my desk. And that night, for the first time in years, I cried. Not because I wasn't enough, but because I realized they would never let me be. 6 months later, everything changed. A new client, Branson Technologies, a $1 billion deal, landed on our floor. Elliot, my manager, handed me the case with a smirk. "You've got this," he said. But there was something in his tone, something that felt like a trap. I didn't know then, but Elliot had already promised that contract to someone else, his friend Todd, another senior analyst. He planned to let me do the work, then take the credit. Still, I dove in headfirst. Late nights, missed weekends, spreadsheets that blurred into static. By the time we presented, I'd built a strategy so airtight that Branson's CEO personally thanked me. "Brilliant work, Danielle," he said, shaking my hand. "We'll finalize next week." But when next week came, the deal went through, and the press release credited Elliot and Todd. My name wasn't mentioned once. I stared at the company email, my heart pounding. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. Because black women who scream in corporate boardrooms become problems. And problems get replaced. So I stayed silent. I told myself, next time they'll see. But silence doesn't earn respect. It only feeds predators. 3 weeks later, HR called me in. The woman sitting across the table was new, Claire, head of compliance. Her face was smooth, unreadable, her voice calm like a pre-recorded message. "Danielle," she said, "this is just a routine inquiry. We've received several complaints about your interpersonal conduct." I blinked. "From whom?" "I can't disclose that information," she said automatically. "But the feedback mentions uncollaborative behavior, resistance to feedback, and a tendency to be combative." Combative. There it was, another coded word. When white men raised their voices in meetings, they were assertive. When white women did it, they were passionate. When I did it, I was hostile. "I see," I said softly, staring at the company logo embroidered on the wall behind her, that perfect grey ampersand that suddenly looked like a noose. "Would you like my side of the story?" She hesitated, then smiled politely. "Of course. Everything you say will be documented." I told her about the Branson project, about how my work had been credited to someone else. I watched her pen move mechanically across the paper, not really writing, just drawing loops. And when I finished, she said, "Thank you, Danielle. We'll review and follow up." But the review never came. The follow-up never came. Instead, an email arrived 3 days later. Mandatory leave pending investigation. That night, I sat in my car in the parking lot long after everyone had gone home. The building's mirrored glass reflected my own face, exhausted, invisible, and angry. For years, I'd believed I could outwork bias. But how do you outwork a system built to erase you? I thought about calling my mother, but I didn't. She'd spent her whole life teaching me to stay steady. Don't give them a reason, baby. Don't let them make you angry. But wasn't I allowed to be? For the first time, I didn't want to be steady. I wanted to be seen. 2 months on leave felt like exile. No co-workers called. No friends reached out. Not even the ones who used to message late at night about office gossip. Silence has many forms. Corporate silence is the cruelest. It's the quiet way people erase your name from meeting invites. The way they pretend your empty desk isn't there. The way they call you unavailable long before you've even left. But in that emptiness, I started remembering who I was before Alston and Gray. A girl from Detroit who grew up watching her mother scrub floors in hospitals so I could buy textbooks. A woman who once believed that knowledge could shield her from discrimination. It couldn't, but it could harm me. So I started researching, not for revenge, but for truth. I read everything about whistleblower laws, internal audits, compliance procedures. If they wanted to treat me like I didn't belong, I would make myself too educated to ignore. That's when I found something strange. A former employee lawsuit, buried in court records. A black man, James Fields, who had sued Alston and Gray 5 years before for racial bias and data tampering. The case was settled quietly. No media coverage. But his testimony mentioned Elliot by name. It was a thread, and I started pulling. Corporate America may silence the truth publicly, but it always whispers it privately. Through LinkedIn messages, personal emails, off-the-record calls. I found James Fields. He was working at a smaller firm now, far away from Chicago. When I reached out, he hesitated. "You don't want to dig into that mess," he warned. "They bury people." "I already am buried," I said. "Might as well dig myself out." He sighed, then told me everything. How Elliot had fabricated reports to cover losses. How Todd manipulated data for client bonuses. And how HR had been complicit, calling it minor discrepancies. "Did you have proof?" I asked. "I did," he said. "They took it when I left. But Danielle, be careful. They destroy what they can't control." That sentence stayed with me. They destroy what they can't control. 2 days later, Rena, my friend in IT, messaged me on an encrypted chat. "Check your inbox." Not from my work email. When I opened the file, my hands trembled. Dozens of internal messages between Elliot, Todd, and Margaret. Jokes about me. She's too confident for her own good. Tone her down before she makes us look bad. And buried in those messages, falsified audit spreadsheets. Proof. I remember whispering, "God, give me patience, or give me press." For a week, I didn't sleep. Part of me wanted to expose them immediately. Another part was terrified. Because I knew what happens to women like me when they fight back. They get labeled, discredited, forgotten. But then I remembered something my mother said when I was 10, after I'd come home crying because a teacher accused me of cheating on a test. The truth doesn't need permission to exist, baby. It just needs courage to be seen. So I chose courage. I compiled everything, emails, time logs, client reports, and built a digital dossier. I didn't go to HR. I didn't go to the media. I went directly to the one person whose money could shake theirs, the CEO of Branson Technologies. That Sunday night, I hit send. And then, I cried until sunrise. Monday, 8:32 a.m. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Ms. Brooks, this is Richard Branson." Not that Branson, but the CEO of the tech giant I'd helped secure. His voice was sharp, curious. "I reviewed your documents. I'd like to meet you. Off record." We met in a quiet cafe away from downtown. He'd brought his legal counsel. And when I laid everything out, the racism, the fraud, the manipulation, their faces shifted from disbelief to horror. This could destroy them," the lawyer said quietly. "That's not my goal," I said. "I just want my name, and the truth restored." He nodded. "Then we'll handle this by the book. But when it goes public, there's no going back." "I don't want to go back," I said. "I want to move forward." For 3 weeks, I worked under Branson's audit team as a silent consultant. We unearthed everything: tax manipulation, client overbilling, performance falsification. All orchestrated by the same people who had labeled me combative. Karma doesn't always come fast, but it never forgets its address. When the report was released, Alston and Gray imploded overnight. 3 executives resigned. The firm's stock plummeted. And Elliot, the man who once told me my tone was unprofessional, was escorted out by security, his box of belongings trembling in his hands. The press called me a whistleblower. I called it redemption. The days following the scandal felt surreal. Reporters called non-stop. LinkedIn requests flooded in. People who never noticed me before suddenly called me inspiring. But I wasn't chasing fame. I was reclaiming dignity. The company offered a settlement. A 7-figure sum and a confidentiality clause. Sign this, their lawyer said, and we'll both move on. I read the paper, then slid it back. No deal, I said. You can't buy silence twice. His jaw dropped. Do you realize what you're giving up? Yes, I said. My peace. I walked away with nothing but my truth. And that was worth more than any settlement. Starting over wasn't easy. I lived off savings, freelanced, built a website for the Brooks Initiative. At first, only a few women joined, mostly black professionals tired of code switching and corporate hypocrisy. But within months it grew. Workshops, seminars, sponsorships. By the end of the first year, we had over 300 members nationwide. We created mentorship programs, legal guidance, and advocacy resources. And every time a woman told me, I was scared until I heard your story, I felt another piece of myself heal. Sometimes, people ask me if I regret it, losing the job, the income, the security. And I tell them, I didn't lose anything. I found my voice. That's enough profit. When the Diversity Summit invite came, I laughed. The audacity of being asked to speak by the same company that tried to erase me. But I went anyway. Because redemption isn't revenge, it's visibility. And sometimes the loudest justice is just being seen. As I walked onto that stage, memories flashed. Elliot's smirk, Margaret's cold tone, the HR report calling me combative. Now they sat in the front row, silent. I took a breath. I was once told my tone was too strong, I began. But that's what happens when you spend years whispering truth into rooms built on lies. You could hear a pin drop. Then I said, diversity isn't about color charts or photo ops. It's about confronting the power. Structures that thrive on silence. And let me tell you, silence is the most profitable currency in corporate America. Some looked down. Some nodded slowly. A few even stood to clap. I didn't stay until the end. I stepped off that stage, walked through the same glass doors that once reflected my fear, and felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. Because I didn't need their validation anymore. The truth had already spoken for me. 2 years later, the Brooks Initiative became a registered foundation. We partnered with universities, sponsored scholarships for underrepresented women in business, and launched an annual conference titled Voices Unbought. One afternoon, I received a handwritten letter. It was from Claire, the HR woman who'd interrogated me years ago. You were right. I stayed silent because it was easier. I've since left Alston and Gray. I want to work for your foundation, to do things the right way this time. I cried when I read that, not because I forgave them, but because redemption isn't about them changing. It's about you choosing not to let their hate define your story. So if you're watching this right now, maybe from a small office, or a classroom, or your car parked outside work, because you just can't face another day pretending, I want you to hear me. You don't have to shrink to survive. You don't have to smile through disrespect. And you don't have to trade silence for safety. Because one day, your truth will become the story someone else needs to live. Don't let them buy your quiet. Use your voice, even if it shakes. And when you do, the world will have no choice but to listen. If Danielle's story touched your heart, don't let it end here. Backhand index pointing right hit, like if you believe truth deserves a microphone. Speech balloon comment. I stand with truth, to show the world silence won't win. Loudspeaker share this story with someone fighting their own quiet battle. And please, help us reach 5,000 subscribers so we can keep amplifying stories that the system tries to bury. Because silence might protect comfort, but truth protects the soul. And every time one of us speaks up, we make the world just a little bit louder with justice.